So if we look at awareness, apparently there is something called the mind-body discussion. And again, that was prompted by, again, listening to Sir Roger Penrose and Jordan Peterson. Obviously, minds of the highest caliber. But without wanting to put any words into, Sir Roger Penrose's mouth or whatever, one gets the impression that his curiosity is to look at, to understand consciousness from the perspective of science, and maybe he believes it is beyond science. Maybe he believes it's different and there's no framework. Whatever. We can't really comment per se. But I would point out that if one tries to understand awareness, and I'll distinguish that in a second, from a scientific model, then again, that's like being a carpenter, because you are limited to what science can detect. And science, at the end of the day, is it's done an extraordinary job of modelling the sand pit in which we operate, the physical reality, but it is still, and especially limited by the ability, or by the should we say, the compulsion to measure things within the sand pit. So the key question is like, sort of, why is that limiting, and what is the thing that somebody limited by that perspective is going to be missing? Well, this is where I come to awareness. I use people talk about what is mind, what is consciousness, and I would suggest that those terms tend to be used for, should we say, what we experience in our minds as human beings, our sense of, ironically, a sense of awareness, but as a sense of awareness as explained and explainable within the context of known scientific constructs. So for me, awareness is defined as being the capacity to have a sense of self, shall we say, that is beyond or not limited by the body. Because to contrast it with the assumption that mind, body, consciousness generally is deemed to be with the body, or associated by the body, or an emergent property of the body, whatever. So if we allow ourselves to have this concept of awareness, which is defined as the capacity to have a sense of self, a sense of awareness, tautology, a sense of potential that is beyond the body, then the question becomes, does it exist? Well, again, if you go and look to science, I suspect they could answer this, and they may indeed have answered this. But it's certainly not mainstream, and most scientists, I would suggest, will avoid discussing this concept because it might threaten their tenure, their standing as a scientist. So the irony is that we mere mortals who are not paid to be scientists, we're not paid to publish papers, we have access, for two reasons, to an investigation that official, respected, responsible scientists do not. They have access to it, but they choose not to explore it, which is a great shame, because it could be a great source of information for them. And it is a very simple question, which each person is going to have to answer to their own satisfaction, and whatever your answer is, it's entirely up to you. But there are any number of models or phenomena that have very widely recognized as, in terms of having common names for the phenomenon, and all of them require a concept of awareness beyond the body. Now, I'll mention, I'll jump ahead a little bit and say that, you know, maybe some smart aleck will say, well, yes, but that, you know, we could have a field theory of consciousness and that explains it. Yeah. Well, the thing is, at the end of the day, then you're basically going to effectively be constructing a field theory of something which the rest of us don't need a field theory, you know, to explain it. We just take it for granted as, you know, awareness and a connection. And so, if you like, in a sense, they would then be reinventing the wheel or trying to formalize something that we take for granted. But the phenomena, and you only, you know, the power of this is that you only need one instance of any one of these to be real, and you have blown the whole concept of neuron-limited awareness out of the water. And in fact, of course, you've already got the fact that, you know, that they're finding cognitive processing in the stomach and what have you. But that's still trying to explain awareness or consciousness at a physical level. So examples of the phenomena, as I say, you only need one of them. And let's start with one that was funded by the CIA, remote viewing. The ability to have someone sit in a room and be aware of something thousands of miles away. This was funded by the CIA because they were having trouble getting spies to survive in the Soviet Union. So, you know, and I think this was popularized as, you know, the man who stared at goats or something like that. But obviously, if you do get accurate information about what's inside a facility thousands of miles away, that isn't explainable by the way your neurons are processing. Now, somebody might try and say, well, yes, but it's because you read this article and that article and you put it together and subconsciously your brain was able to, you know, you can always come up with a theory to explain every single one of these, but there's a certain element of, at some point it becomes more embarrassing to try and explain away each event than it does simply to accept, well, yeah, it's just how things work. So remote viewing is one, because you would have to be aware of something that is thousands of miles away from where you're physically located. Clairvoyance would be another, because you would be having awareness of another person's situation or information about future events or current events, which was not rationally available to somebody sitting in a room that doesn't even know the people involved. And, you know, I've got some charming stories of that for myself. But again, it's your own exploration. I'm just highlighting the reason why such an exploration is relevant. You've got from clairvoyance, you've also got clairaudience, be able to hear information, and you might say clairempathy or telepathy. But first, let's look at telepathy. Is the ability to receive information from another person, again, despite being disconnected from them, either space, time, unaware of their existence, whatever it might be. It's the classic, I was just thinking of you, that sort of thing. But again, you have 6 billion people on the planet, you can say, well, it's always going to be coincidence. Well, if you've had fairly dramatic experiences of telepathy, then you're going to start thinking, well, actually, there's a bit more to it than coincidence. And again, I've had some experiences which were amusing and charming, and certainly nudged me towards this perspective. Telepathy is would be a variation on that, where you're actually experiencing somebody else's emotion, despite there being thousands of miles away. And a dear friend of mine actually experienced that, and she experienced my trauma at the time, even though she was thousands of miles away and had no awareness of what was going on, why I should be feeling that trauma. But she called me to find out what was going on. And I was like, well, funny you should say that, because so that would be another candidate, because obviously you cannot explain it particularly easily by saying, oh, well, based on your diary and phone calls and all the rest of it, she knew this. Actually, this person, she'd been out of my life and getting on with her own life for some months. So no, she had no idea that any of the stuff that happened was going on. What else do we have? Near-death experiences. Now, those, I suppose you can say, you can put it down to processing, the brain trying to process a situation because it still has energy going around and still functioning, whatever. And that, fine. If that's how you choose to see it, that's how you choose to see it. And I admit, since that one, you can only really evaluate it if you have, it's a bit of a sort of circular argument, because you can only really clarify whether it is an experience of something beyond your body if you've got experience of what is beyond your body in the first place. So yes, it's understandable that one's a little tricky. But then out-of-body experiences are far more common, and one of them charming, again, I had a girlfriend that reported one to me, and it was like she was giving a seminar, and all of a sudden she was above her body while the seminar was going on and watching herself giving the training. And again, somebody might say, well, yes, but the brain is capable of modeling that and all that. This element of like, this is where you get to the dogmatic element. There comes a point where it becomes a little bit embarrassing to try and explain every event in the entire history of humanity that contradicts the idea that we have awareness beyond the body. But if you really want to go, if that's how you want to be, then it's none of my business. You carry on. And it is always, the point is, all of these experiences are accessible to ordinary individuals. And it's one thing for scientists to avoid them because it's not worth their job or whatever, or their mindset is that everything should fit inside a model that fits inside the model of logic and science and experiment and proof. Well, that's fine. Scientists are somewhat bound by that. You are not. So it's entirely up to you if you do this kind of exploration. And one of the most beautiful and invaluable sources of awareness beyond the body is quite simply the ability to sit down and chat with an entity that attaches to a body for the purpose of having a conversation with you, otherwise known as channeling. And that is one of the most beautiful and simple experiences. And again, it's up to you. It's like, oh, as one person put it after such a session, it's like, oh, he's a bloody good actor. Yes, but at some point you have to ask, how would you explain? It's kind of like the Coke Pepsi double blind test. How do you explain somebody that has no experience of somebody else having information about a situation that they have no rational reason to understand? But anyway, I just want to put out there that there are the biggest questions in some ways are actually very easy and open to exploration, but it is entirely down to the individual if you choose to explore it. Anyway, so that's part 2. I just want to leave that with you, and then we'll touch on something else.